Welcome to the ultimate hub for Reddit's wildest cheating and relationship stories. Hit subscribe so you never miss the latest drama, heartbreaks, and unbelievable twists.
Hello, Mark. The air in my own apartment felt foreign, thick with a perfume I didn't recognize and the silent, menacing presence of the mountain of a man standing by my window. Elena, my wife, my ex-wife, sat in my armchair, looking as comfortable as if she were hosting a dinner party. The woman who'd wept and pleaded with me just months ago was gone. In her place was this polished, cold stranger. "You look good," she said, her smile never reaching the chilling emptiness in her eyes. "Relaxed? What do you want, Elena?" She stood, moving with a fluid grace that was new, and picked up a thick manila folder from my coffee table. "I want my life back," she said, tapping the folder. "And this is my insurance policy." She opened it and slid out a photograph. It was of me, meeting with a woman in a dimly lit bar. Another photo followed, me in a diner with my friend Mike. Then bank statements, phone records, a meticulously documented timeline. "You've been busy," I managed, my voice tight. "I've been thorough," she corrected. "The same way you were thorough when you destroyed me. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to transfer half of those protected assets back to me. You're going to publicly apologize for the harassment campaign. And if you don't..." She let the threat hang in the air. "Then this folder goes to the police, the media, and your employer." I stared at the evidence she'd collected, a twisted mirror of my own righteous fury. She had me, and she knew it. "You have until tomorrow night," she said, heading for the door, her bodyguard falling into step behind her. The old house. 8 p.m. Come alone. It all started 3 months ago, with the sound of laughter. The laughter hit me like a sledgehammer to the chest. I stood frozen in my own kitchen doorway, work boots still caked with mud from the construction site, my lunchbox dangling from my numb fingers. Through the thin wall separating our kitchen from Chloe's room, I could hear my wife Elena's voice mixing with our 17-year-old daughter's giggles. "Mom, you're so bad," Chloe said, her voice dripping with admiration. 3 different guys. How do you even keep track?" "Honey, variety is the spice of life," Elena replied, and I could practically hear her shrugging. "Your father's been the same boring man for 18 years. Sometimes a woman needs to sample other flavors." My lunchbox hit the floor with a metallic crash. "Besides," Elena continued, oblivious to the sound, "Richard has that confidence your dad never had. Leo knows how to make a woman feel alive. And Alex from the gym, well, let's just say he's got stamina." I pressed my back against the kitchen wall, my heart hammering so hard I thought it might burst. 18 years of marriage. 18 years of working 2 jobs to keep this family afloat while Elena stayed home, claiming she was finding herself. "What if Dad finds out?" Chloe asked. "Your father." Elena laughed. A sound that used to be my favorite in the world, but now felt like grinding glass. "Mark's too weak to do anything about it. He'll just sulk and work harder, like he always does." I'd heard enough. My hands were shaking as I grabbed my keys from the hook and headed for the door. I needed air. I needed space. I needed to think. 3 hours later, I sat in my truck outside our suburban home, watching the neighborhood I'd helped build with my own 2 hands. Richard Peterson lived 2 houses down with his wife, Jessica. The Martinez family lived across the street. I'd installed their kitchen cabinets, fixed their plumbing, helped them move furniture. Leo Martinez and Richard Peterson had been screwing my wife. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Mark, we need to talk. Jessica Peterson." I stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back a single word. "When?" The reply was instant. "Now. Coffee shop on Maple Street." Jessica was already there when I arrived, her usually perfect blonde hair disheveled, her eyes red-rimmed. She pushed a manila folder across the table without a word. "What's this?" I asked, my voice hoarse. "Open it." Inside were photographs. Elena and Richard in our bed. Elena and Leo Martinez in their hot tub. Elena and some guy I didn't recognize in what looked like a hotel room. There was also a flash drive. "Video?" I asked, my voice flat. Jessica nodded, her expression grim. Richard thought he was being clever, filming everything. I found his little collection last week. I closed the folder, my hands surprisingly steady, despite the rage building in my chest like a pressure cooker. How long have you known? 6 months, maybe longer. Jessica's voice was bitter. I kept hoping it would stop. Kept thinking Richard would come to his senses. And the others? Maria Martinez found out yesterday. She's filing for divorce. The gym guy's wife doesn't know yet, but she will. I looked at Jessica across the table. Really looked at her. She was attractive, well-dressed, the kind of woman who'd never worked a day of manual labor in her life. But right now, she looked as shattered as I felt. What do you want from me? I asked. I want them to pay, she said quietly, her eyes locking onto mine. All of them. Your wife ruined 4 homes, Mark. It's time she answered for that. I stood up, tucking the folder under my arm. I'll be in touch. As I walked back to my truck, I felt something shift inside me. The Mark who'd walked into that coffee shop was gone. In his place was someone harder. Someone who understood that nice guys don't just finish last. They get humiliated, betrayed, and discarded. But not this time. The next morning, I called in sick to both my jobs and drove downtown. The law office of Sterling and Associates occupied the top floor of a glass building that cost more per month than I made in 6. Mr. Evans, the receptionist said, Mr. Sterling will see you now. Andrew Sterling was younger than I'd expected, maybe 40, with the kind of sharp suit that screamed expensive education. But his handshake was firm, and his eyes were calculating. I understand you need asset protection, he said, settling behind a massive mahogany desk. My wife's been cheating with multiple partners, I said, my voice steady. I need to make sure she can't take half of everything I've built. Sterling leaned forward. How long has this been going on? At least 6 months that I know of. Probably longer. Good. That gives us plenty of grounds. In this state, infidelity significantly affects alimony. We can also pursue alienation of affection claims against the other parties. I handed him the folder Jessica had given me. Sterling's eyebrows rose as he flipped through the contents. This is solid evidence, he said, a hint of professional appreciation in his tone. Very solid. My paralegal, Nina, will help you set up an LLC today. We'll transfer your assets there before filing. Your wife won't see it coming. Nina turned out to be a brunette with sharp green eyes and a no-nonsense attitude. She had me sign papers, set up bank accounts, and transfer funds with military efficiency. You're being smart about this, she said as we finished the paperwork. Most men in your situation just react emotionally. I'm done reacting, I said. It's time to act. That evening, I found Chloe in her room, scrolling through her phone. I knocked on the doorframe. Can we talk? She looked up surprised. Sure, Dad. What's up? I sat on the edge of her bed, choosing my words carefully. I know about your mother. Her face went pale. Dad, I'm not angry at you, I said, keeping my voice even. But I need you to understand something. What your mother is doing isn't empowerment or liberation. It's betrayal. And it has consequences. Chloe's eyes filled with tears. She said you wouldn't care. That you were too weak to. I raised a daughter, I interrupted quietly. Not a groupie. Don't let her poison you against the idea of loyalty and respect. I stood to leave, then paused at the door. I love you, Chloe. But I won't pretend this family isn't broken. Elena came home an hour later, humming to herself as she set down her purse. She was glowing, the way she used to after we'd made love early in our marriage. The thought was like acid in my gut. Hey, babe, she said, leaning in to kiss my cheek. I didn't flinch. How was work? Fine, I said, not looking up from the laptop I was pretending to read. How was your day? Oh, you know. Errands. Coffee with the girls. Girls, right, I said, closing the laptop with a soft click. Elena. We need to talk. Something in my tone made her freeze. About what? I know. The color drained from her face. For a moment, just a moment, I saw fear flicker in her eyes. Then her expression hardened, replaced by a mask of defiance. Know what exactly? Everything, I said, my voice level and cold. Richard. Leo. The gym guy. All of it. She stood there for a long moment, sizing me up. Then, impossibly, she shrugged, a gesture of pure dismissal. So, what are you going to do about it? The casualness of her response, the utter lack of shame or remorse, hit me like a physical blow. It erased any lingering doubt, any thought of reconciliation. We'll see, I said. The next morning, Elena decided to throw a barbecue. Neighborhood get-together, she announced brightly as if nothing had happened. This Saturday. I already invited everyone, including Richard and Jessica, including Leo and Maria. I watched her make the calls, her voice bright and cheerful, playing the perfect suburban hostess. She was testing me, daring me to react, confident in her belief that I was too weak to do anything. She had no idea what was coming. Saturday arrived with perfect, sunny weather. Our backyard filled with neighbors, their kids running around the pool while the adults chatted over beer and grilled burgers. Elena was in her element, wearing a sundress that showed off her figure, flirting shamelessly with Richard while his wife, Jessica, stood 10 feet away, her hands clenched into fists. That's when Jessica made her move. "Elena," she called out, her voice clear and carrying across the yard. "I need to talk to you." The general chatter died down as people sensed the tension. Elena turned, still smiling her perfect hostess smile. "Of course, Jessica. What about? About you screwing my husband." Dead silence. Even the kids stopped splashing in the pool. Elena's smile never wavered. "I have no idea what you're talking about." "Really?" Jessica reached into her purse and pulled out a glossy 8x10 photograph. "Because this looks exactly like you." She held up the image. Elena and Richard, naked in our master bedroom. Richard's face was clearly visible as he looked back at the camera with a satisfied grin. Elena lunged for the photo, but Jessica was ready. She sidestepped and grabbed Elena by the hair, dragging her down to the grass. They rolled across the lawn, Jessica screaming, "You home-wrecking slut," while Elena tried to claw at her face. I made no move to intervene. Neither did Richard, who stood frozen with a beer in his hand. The other guests backed away, some pulling out phones to record the chaos. Finally, Leo Martinez and another neighbor managed to pull them apart. Jessica's white blouse was grass-stained, and Elena's perfect hair was a tangled mess. "This isn't over," Jessica hissed, smoothing down her clothes with shaky hands. "Not even close." She walked out, leaving behind a yard full of shocked neighbors and one very exposed wife. The party died quickly after that. I woke up Monday morning to Elena screaming my name from the front yard. "Mark! Mark, get out here!" I found her standing in our driveway, staring down the street with her mouth hanging open. Following her gaze, I saw what had gotten her attention. 2 blocks away, visible from half the neighborhood, stood a massive billboard. The kind they usually used for car dealerships or fast food restaurants. But this one had a different message. In 6-foot-tall red letters, it read, "Elena Evans, home wrecker and community property." Below that, in smaller text, "Ask her about Richard, Leo, and Alex. Their wives already know." "Oh my God," Elena whispered, her voice trembling. "Oh my God, oh my God." Cars were already slowing down to read it. Our neighbor across the street stood in his bathrobe, shading his eyes to get a better look. Someone was taking pictures. "Who did this?" Elena spun around to face me, her eyes wild with a mixture of rage and humiliation. "Mark, who did this?" "How would I know?" "You had to have someone had to." She was hyperventilating now. "This is illegal. This is slander." "Is it?" I asked calmly. "Which part isn't true?" She stared at me like I'd grown a second head. In 18 years of marriage, I'd never spoken to her like that. Never challenged her. Never pushed back. "You need to fix this," she demanded. "Right now. Call someone. Call the city. Call." "I'm going to work," I said, walking past her toward my truck. "Mark," she screamed after me. "You can't just leave me here." I could, and I did. At the construction site, word had already spread. Frank, my foreman, clapped me on the shoulder. "Saw the news, buddy." "That's rough." "What news?" He showed me his phone. The billboard photo was already trending on social media. Hashtag Elena Evans was picking up steam with hundreds of comments and shares. By lunchtime, it had hit the local news websites. Suburban billboard scandal rocks local neighborhood. Someone had dug up photos from the barbecue fight. Jessica was giving an interview about rampant adultery destroying families. I called Nina, the paralegal, from my truck. "Did you see it?" she asked without preamble. "The billboard? Kind of hard to miss." "Not just that. Check your email." I opened my phone and found a message from an anonymous account. The subject line read, "Phase 1 complete." Inside was a single line of text. "How do you like the view? Any idea who's behind this?" I asked Nina. "I have some theories," she said. "But honestly, does it matter? Someone's doing the work for us." That evening, I came home to find Elena huddled on the couch, curtains drawn, tissues scattered around her like fallen snow. She'd clearly been crying for hours. "The school called," she said without looking up, her voice thick and raw. "Parents are complaining. They want Chloe off the cheerleading squad." "What did you tell them?" "What could I tell them?" She finally looked at me, her eyes puffy and desperate. "Mark, you have to help me. Please. I'll do anything." "Anything?" "Yes. I'll stop. I'll never see any of them again. We can go to counseling. We can move away. Just, please make this stop." I sat down in the armchair across from her, studying her face. For a fleeting moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. "The time for stopping was 6 months ago, Elena," I said, my voice devoid of emotion. "Before you decided I was too weak to matter." Her expression shifted, the desperate hope in her eyes fading into something colder, more resentful. "So, this is revenge. You're punishing me." "I'm not doing anything," I said, standing up. "I'm just not protecting you anymore." That night, I moved my things into the guest room. In the morning, I'd be calling a realtor about apartments. But first, I had some people to thank. I drove to Jessica's house and knocked on the door. She answered in a bathrobe, her hair wet from the shower. "Mark. I wondered when you'd come by." "The billboard," I said. "That was you." She smiled, and for the first time since this started, it was a real smile that reached her eyes. "My sister Diane owns a sign company in Memphis. She drove up yesterday with a crew and some very flexible ethics." "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet," Jessica said. "We're just getting started." Behind her, I heard another woman's voice. "Who is it, Jess?" "Just a neighbor, Diane," Jessica called back. To me, she said quietly, "Diane's staying for a few days. She's got ideas." As I walked back to my truck, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Hope. Not the naive hope of the old Mark who believed in fairness and playing by the rules. This was darker. Hungrier. This was the hope of watching your enemies destroy themselves. The next morning, I met with Sterling to finalize the paperwork. All our joint assets were now protected in the LLC. Our savings accounts had been transferred to new banks Elena didn't know about. The house, which was in both our names, would have to be sold and the proceeds split, but everything else, the fruits of 18 years of my labor, was locked down tight. "She's going to fight this," Sterling warned as I signed the last document. "Let her try." "Mark," he said, his expression serious, "I need to ask. Are you planning anything extra legal?" I looked at him across the mahogany desk. "I'm a construction worker, Mr. Sterling. I build things. I don't break them." "Good," he said, though he didn't look entirely convinced. "Because if this goes to court, we need your hands completely clean." When I got home, Elena was waiting with a stack of bank statements and a pen, her face a mask of fury. "I tried to access our accounts," she said, her voice shaking. "They're frozen." "Moved," I corrected. "Into asset protection." "You can't do that. Those are my accounts too." "Were," I said. Past tense. Her face went through several shades of red before settling on a deep, mottled purple. "You bastard. You planned this." "I protected myself." "There's a difference." "I'll sue you. I'll take you for everything." "With what money?" I asked quietly. "Your lawyer fees just went up considerably." She threw the papers at me, pages scattering across the kitchen floor. "This is financial abuse." "This is consequence," I said, bending to pick up the documents. "Something you should have considered before you were bragging about your conquests to our daughter." That stopped her cold. "What?" "I heard you, Elena. Both of you. laughing about how weak I am. How I'm too pathetic to matter. For the first time since this whole nightmare began, she looked genuinely shaken. Her manufactured confidence crumbled, revealing the raw fear beneath. Mark, Save it, I said, cutting her off. The divorce papers will be served tomorrow. I left her standing speechless in the kitchen and drove to work. On the way, my phone buzzed with a text from an anonymous number. Turn on channel 7. Now. I pulled over and found a live stream on my phone. A reporter stood in front of the still-standing billboard, interviewing Jessica Peterson. Mrs. Peterson, what drove you to take such a public approach? When someone destroys multiple families, the community has a right to know, Jessica said, looking directly and calmly into the camera. Elena Evans conducted affairs with at least 3 married men in our neighborhood. She bragged about it. She even corrupted her own teenage daughter with this behavior. The reporter then cut to shaky phone footage from the barbecue, the grainy video of Jessica dragging Elena across the lawn while neighbors watched in shock. My phone buzzed again. A text from the same number. Enjoying the show? Diane. Jessica's sister. The response came immediately after I read it. Good. Meet me at Murphy's Bar tonight, 8 p.m. We need to discuss Phase 2. That evening, Murphy's Bar was nearly empty. Diane sat in a corner booth, and I recognized her immediately. She looked like her sister Jessica, but harder around the edges, older, more weathered by battles I couldn't imagine. You must be Mark, she said as I slid into the booth opposite her. Her voice was low and steady. Thanks for the billboard, I said. A thin smile touched her lips. That was just a warm-up. Diane signaled the bartender for another beer. Tell me, how far are you willing to go? Legally? As far as it takes. Good answer. Because what I'm thinking will require some creativity. She pulled out a tablet and showed me a social media profile. Elena's Facebook page, which usually showcased her perfect suburban life, charity luncheons, book club meetings, tennis lessons, now looked like a battlefield. Hundreds of comments under her most recent posts, most of them variations of homewrecker and worse. Someone's been busy spreading the news, Diane said with a grin. You, me, and about 50 friends with very active accounts. Amazing how fast word travels when you know the right people. I scrolled through the comments. Some were from our neighbors, others from people I didn't recognize, but all of them were brutal. This is just social media, Diane continued, putting the tablet down. A good start. But what if we took it further? What if Elena's part-time colleagues at the real estate firm knew? Her boss? The clients she's trying to impress. Elena worked 2 days a week at a high-end agency where image was everything. How? I asked. Diane's smile turned predatory. Leave that to me. The next day, Elena was served with divorce papers at the grocery store. The process server found her in the organic produce aisle, handed her the documents, and walked away while other shoppers watched. She called me immediately, her voice a frantic whisper. Mark, we need to talk. Face to face. We're done talking, Elena. Please, I'm begging you. This has gone too far. Has it? I said, my voice flat. Because from where I'm sitting, it's just getting started. I hung up and went back to work. That afternoon, Nina called with an update. Good news on our front, she said, her voice crisp and professional. Maria Martinez filed her papers this morning. She's going after Leo for everything. Also, Jessica officially retained our firm to handle her divorce from Richard. That makes 3 of you. 3 marriages destroyed, I said, the words tasting like ash. Your wife was a busy woman. That evening, I drove past our house, my old house, and saw Elena's car in the driveway. The lights were on, but the curtains were drawn tight, sealing her inside with her self-inflicted shame. The billboard was still visible from the street, lit up like a beacon of her betrayal. My phone buzzed. Another anonymous text from Diane. Check channel 7. 10 o'clock news. I found a sports bar down the road, ordered a beer, and waited, my stomach churning. When the news came on, I nearly choked. The lead story was about the Maple Street adultery scandal. They'd interviewed a tearful but resolute Maria Martinez, who spoke about her husband's infidelity and the destruction of her family. They'd spoken to other neighbors who expressed shock and disgust. But the coup de grace was the final interview. A sharply dressed woman I didn't recognize, standing outside the sleek glass and steel building of a high-end real estate agency. The reporter asked, "I'm here with Susan Chandler, Ms. Evans's managing broker. What's your response to these allegations?" Susan Chandler looked directly into the camera, her expression one of cool disappointment. "Elena Evans has been placed on administrative leave pending an internal investigation. We take our agents' professional conduct and reputation very seriously at our firm." I stared at the screen. Elena had been so proud of that job, her one small claim to a life outside our marriage. It was her symbol of independence. And now it was gone. My phone rang. It was Diane. "Enjoying the show?" she asked, a hint of dark humor in her voice. "How did you?" her boss. "I told you I know people," she said simply. "Mrs. Chandler's daughter is in my niece's ballet class." Small world, isn't it? I was speechless. The precision, the ruthlessness of it all, was terrifying and exhilarating. I started, not sure what to say. "This is justice, Mark," Diane finished for me, her voice firm. Sweet, satisfying justice. I couldn't argue with that. Elena lasted 3 more days before she finally cracked. I was at my new apartment, a small, clean place downtown, when she started pounding on the door around 11 p.m. "Mark, open up. I know you're in there." I looked through the peephole. She was still in her pajamas, her hair wild, her face streaked with tears and mascara. She looked like a ghost of the woman I had married. "Mark, please," she cried through the door. "They fired me. The book club kicked me out. Mrs. Patterson from next door won't even look at me at the grocery store." I opened the door and she rushed past me into the tiny living room. "You have to make this stop," she said, grabbing my arm, her grip surprisingly strong. "Whatever you're paying these people, I'll double it. I'll do anything." "I'm not paying anyone, Elena." "Don't lie to me," she shrieked. "The billboard, the news interviews, my boss getting called, that doesn't just happen." I poured myself a glass of water and sat down, creating a small island of calm in her storm. "Maybe people are just tired of being lied to. This is insane. You're destroying my entire life." "I'm not destroying anything," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "I'm just not cleaning up your messes anymore." She stared at me as if I were speaking a foreign language. In her world, Mark was the fixer. Mark was the one who absorbed the damage and kept the family functioning, no matter the cost to himself. "What about Chloe?" she demanded, shifting her attack. "She's getting bullied at school because of this." "Because of you." That got my attention. "What kind of bullying?" "Kids calling her names, saying her mother's a cheating witch. Someone wrote 'daughter of a whore' on her locker." I felt a stab of genuine anger, but not at who Elena expected. "Then maybe you should have thought about that before you decided to sample other flavors," I said, throwing her own words back at her. "Your choices, your consequences." "Mark, please," she was crying now, ugly sobs that shook her whole body. "I'll change. I'll be better. We can fix this." "We can't fix anything, Elena," I said, the finality of it settling in my gut. "Because there is no we anymore." She left around midnight, but not before screaming at me for 10 more minutes, her voice echoing in the sterile hallway of my new life. I watched from my window as she drove away, weaving slightly. I hoped she'd make it home safe, but it was a distant, detached sort of hope. The part of me that would have rushed out to stop her was dead and buried. The next morning, I got a call from a number I hadn't seen in a while. Mike Trent, my best friend from high school. We'd stayed in touch over the years, though not as closely since he'd done 2 tours in Afghanistan before coming back to work private security. "Mark, man." "I saw the news," he said, his voice deep and steady. "You okay?" "Better than okay, Mike." "Good," he said, and I could hear the relief in his voice. "Listen, I'm between jobs right now. If you need any help with anything, you let me know." I thought about that offer as I drove to work. Mike was 6 feet 2 inches, 200 pounds of solid muscle and military training. He'd seen actual combat, knew how to handle himself, and had always been fiercely loyal to his friends. "Actually," I said, calling him back during my lunch break, "I might have something for you." We met that evening at a diner just outside of town. Mike looked good. Older than when we graduated, of course, but still solid, still carrying an aura of quiet capability that could turn dangerous if he needed it to. "So, what's the situation?" he asked over coffee. I told him everything. The affairs, the humiliation, the conversation with Chloe, the divorce, the billboard. He listened without interrupting, his face getting harder with each detail. "She said, what about you being too weak?" he asked when I finally finished, his voice dangerously low. That I was too pathetic to matter. Mike was quiet for a long moment, stirring his coffee. "You know, in the army, we had a saying. The quiet ones are the ones you watch out for." "I'm not looking for violence, Mike." "I know," he said, meeting my eyes. "But sometimes people need to understand that their actions have real weight. That there are consequences beyond their own feelings." He reached into the inner pocket of his jacket and pulled out a small, flat black device. Voice recorder. Military grade. Picks up conversation clearly through walls. "What am I supposed to do with this?" "Whatever you need to do," he said, pushing it across the table. "Just remember, sometimes the best weapon isn't a fist or a gun. It's information." That weekend, Elena had dinner with her sister, Claire. I knew this because Mike had followed her to the restaurant and texted me updates. While they were gone, I used the spare key I still had to slip into the house, our old house, and place the recorder in Elena's bedroom, taping it securely to the underside of her nightstand. 2 days later, I had exactly what I needed. The recording was crystal clear. Elena's voice came first, laced with theatrical despair. "Claire, you don't understand. Mark's not the same man I married. He's become this cold, calculating thing. It's actually kind of scary." Then Claire's sharp reply. "Maybe you should have thought about that before you cheated on him with half the neighborhood." "It wasn't half the neighborhood. God, you're as bad as everyone else." "Elena, you screwed 3 married men. Their wives are devastated. Their children are." "Their children will get over it," Elena interrupted, her voice suddenly flat and dismissive. "Kids are resilient." There was a long pause, then Claire's voice, quieter, full of disbelief. "What happened to you? When did you become so selfish?" "I'm not selfish," Elena snapped back. "I'm finally living my life instead of being some construction worker's boring wife. Mark never excited me. He never made me feel alive." "So you destroyed 4 families because you were bored?" "I didn't destroy anything. Everyone's acting like I committed a murder." That recording was gold. Pure, unadulterated gold. I immediately called Diane and sent her the audio file. Within hours, it was everywhere. Social media, neighborhood message boards, even a local talk radio station played excerpts during their morning Hot Topics segment. The reaction was swift and brutal. Elena's remaining defenders, the few people who had bought her sob story about being persecuted, turned against her overnight. The city council, responding to a flood of pressure from constituents, finally voted to have the billboard removed, but it was a hollow victory for Elena. The damage was done. Everyone had heard her in her own words. Better yet, someone had recognized her voice and connected it to her real estate license. Elena had been trying to keep that job loss quiet, but now her former brokerage was flooded with angry calls and emails from the community. An official complaint was filed with the state licensing board. But the best part came 3 days later when Nina called with news that made my entire week. "Mark, you need to see this," she said, her voice buzzing with excitement. "Jessica's divorce attorney just filed a motion for alienation of affection damages against your wife." "How much?" $400,000. I nearly dropped the phone. "Can she actually collect that? With the evidence we have?" Nina's laugh was sharp. "Photos, videos, recordings, witness testimony from half the neighborhood. Jessica's lawyer is going for the throat." "Absolutely." That evening, I treated myself to dinner at a nice restaurant downtown. As I sat there enjoying a steak and a beer, finally feeling a sense of vindication, my phone buzzed. A text from Diane. "Saw the news about the lawsuit. Well played." I typed back. "Just getting started." The response came immediately. "Want to finish this properly? Meet me tomorrow. Same place." I had been wondering when Phase 3 would begin. Grace was already waiting when I arrived at Murphy's bar the next evening. She had a laptop open and several manila folders spread across the table. "Sit down," she said without looking up. "We need to talk about the endgame." I slid into the booth. "Endgame? Your ex-wife is cornered," she said, finally looking at me, her eyes sharp and focused. "But she's not finished. Women like Elena don't just disappear quietly. They lash out." As if on cue, my phone rang. Elena's number. "Don't answer it," Grace said, "but put it on speaker." The call went to voicemail. A few seconds later, my phone chimed with the message notification. I played it back. Elena's voice was slurred and thick with rage. "Mark, you son of a bitch. I know what you're doing. I know you're behind all of this. But you made one mistake. You forgot about Chloe. She's still my daughter, and she still loves me. So whatever sick game you're playing, it ends now, or I'll make sure she knows exactly what kind of monster her father really is." Grace raised an eyebrow. "See what I mean? She's drunk. She's desperate. And desperate people do stupid things." She turned the laptop toward me. On the screen was a Facebook post from Elena's account, posted an hour ago. "To everyone who's been spreading lies about me, you don't know the whole story. My husband Mark is an abusive, controlling man who's been planning this revenge for months. He's hired people to harass me, destroy my reputation, and ruin my life. I have evidence of his criminal conspiracy, and I'm going to the police tomorrow." The post had already collected dozens of comments, most of them skeptical, but a few expressing support. "She's trying to flip the narrative," Grace said. "Make herself the victim. No one's going to believe her." "Some people will," Grace corrected. "And that's all she needs. A few sympathetic voices, maybe a lawyer who sees dollar signs. She could drag this out for years, poison Chloe against you for good. She could turn this around." "So, what do you suggest?" I asked, a cold knot forming in my stomach. Grace closed the laptop and leaned forward, her expression deadly serious. "We finish this. Completely. No comeback. No second chances. No redemption arc. What did you have in mind?" Grace's smile was thin and sharp as a razor. "Have you ever heard of a controlled demolition?